Well, listen, let's do this. Let's kick this bad boy off.
Yeah.
Why don't you introduce yourself to anybody that's listening?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for having me here, by the way. Big fan. So my name's Todd Frey. I'm a veteran, husband, a father, Christian, good loving person who just wants to take care of people. Happen to be in talent acquisition. Work for a company called Equinix. But my passion is just really helping our community, bringing them out of military service and into the civilian world with great opportunities.
Man, that's a great narrative. What where do you start? Where are you from? Colorado?
Yeah, born and raised, but my father was in furniture sales. He was executive for a Rocky Mountain West Coast furniture company. I moved around a bunch. Like it was like I was a Navy brat, you know. I served in the Navy for 23 years as well. But
Oh yeah,
yeah,
by
I
the way.
forgot about that. But my father was in sales, so in furniture sales. So we had moved like home. You know, the AOR was Denver, Colorado, and we moved to like California, San Diego. Moved back to Colorado, same house. Moved
For
to,
real?
Yeah, moved to like Albuquerque. Moved back to Colorado. Moved to Los Angeles. Moved back to Colorado, San Diego, Oklahoma.
Did you have awesome furniture in your house every time you
Every
moved?
time, brand new furniture. Like
Was that kind of cool or?
It was cool because, you know, if something spilled, you got, you know, like my kid spilt the coffee on my brand new couch that we just moved into this house, and now there's a huge stain on it. You vacuum it, you get it clean, but it never comes out. My dad would just get a new couch, you
I'm
know.
all about that.
So it
I'm
was
all about
fun
that.
like that. But we always went somewhere. I went to 8 different elementary schools, 4 different middle schools, and 2 different high schools.
Wow.
But
What did you gain from that though? I mean, that could be viewed as a good thing or a bad thing. Like, did that give you an advantage to where you learned how to make friends better than the average person because you had to survive, or what was the upside? What was the downside? I guess.
well, the downside was the instability of constantly on the move. You know, like a family, like a military family.
Does that instability of constantly being on the move, did that also bring your family closer together, or was it a
No.
constant state of?
It- Yeah, my family was a hot mess. My father was an alcoholic. My mother
Gotcha.
was an enabler. My brother was my half brother, who was the black sheep, who was the protector of the kids and the mother. My sister was the in between and became that person when my brother left because of the situations. And,
Sure.
it was really tough and everyone had a tough childhood or whatever. You know, people say that. Yeah, I had a tough childhood, but what was really tough about is there was no escape, because if it wasn't happening at home, it was happening in the school. So I would be the new kid. So, you know, not to be like big headed or conceited, but I was a new boy. Every girl liked me.
Oh
you
yeah,
know,
because you're a new
and
toy.
every boy hated me.
Yeah.
And I remember, you know, recess, I was being chased around the yard or whatever by the boys. I was staying home. I was staying after school in programs so they wouldn't beat me up on the way home from school. So I was always that. And then when I came back to all my friends, it was cool, but I missed out on so much of that time with them. So it was like, you know, always in flux.
Interesting. So that's quite a bit to have to endure as a young person. But how has that helped you now as an adult?
Well, I think everything in your life prepares you for whatever is ahead. I guess a little piece of that moving around as a kid, when I joined the military, I was able to like be ready for that. Like when everybody went to work remote after COVID hit, right? I was remote for like the last 10 years
With
with Equinix, with
oh, that's right.
previous positions. When I had my own firm, I would work from home. You know,
Sure.
I didn't have to go.
So
to
you're
a
already
place.
massively efficient.
Yeah.
Used to these routines. I don't think it was hard for some of us.
There was a lot of people though. They're like, but then when they got used to it, they're like, yeah, it's cool, and they don't want to go back.
Then they
in.
don't want to go back. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a big problem.
But I think that movement around, moving around a lot as a youth, prepared me for the transition a lot for the military. You know, I started in A school, you know, boot camp, Great Lakes, Pensacola, Jacksonville, A school, C school.
What was your rate?
I was an AT when I started out,
Aviation
electronics technician.
Where's that school at? Florida?
Well, it was in Memphis, but when we opened in ATTC Pensacola. So it was a brand new building. It's like the paint was still drying
that
on
probably
the
didn't
walls.
suck.
No, not at all. It was Pensacola, P Beach,
New dorms probably. Or
everything
new
was fresh. Like working parties, cleaning, was
Pensacola.
piece of cake in Pensacola. And then, you know, it was everything. It was like the cradle of aviation and you know, in its respect. It was great. And then took orders to Puerto Rico, and that's where I met the wife and had our first kid. And
we got to back this train up a lot, actually. So you had the first question is where you're from, and you are a gypsy, right? So you are from wherever, and I get it. A lot of us are. I mean, you and I were talking about it, but our parents are the baby boomer generation, and a lot of those baby boomer kids were the byproduct of a lot of bad decisions, you know, and those bad decisions didn't make those people bad people. They just lived in an incredible time where people left to go to combat, you know, during World War II, and they didn't have rotational deployments like we did. I'd go on a 6-month, you know, med run. We knew when we'd be back, or, you know, ballpark, at least within that month. These people are gone, like, when the war is over, we'll see you, right? Mm-hmm. And I think everyone was just living as though they were dying, and a lot of decisions were made that led to a lot of kids being made that didn't have, like my dad was adopted as a byproduct of, you know, World War II. And that created a generation of people that were just winging it. It wasn't like a homogenous repeat of the last product, right? It's kind of recreating it on their own, right? And a lot of us now, guys like us, are just the byproduct of that. You know, people that are good people, they did the best they could, but they had no idea what they were doing.
Yeah.
And I think that all parents can empathize for something like that to some extent, right?
Yeah. I think there's no instruction book on, you know, parenting to making it through the day. You know, I mean, there's some really
like a
good
funny
books.
magazine. It would be like a lot of comics,
like Mad. Remember Mad magazines?
That's the perfect one for parenting, right?
Yeah, totally.
So, but hold on. So, you were born in some state. You were raised between Colorado, San Diego, and New Mexico. It sounds like. Out of those places, like, where did you finish high school to end up decide that you were going to start? Well, first of all, go into the military, because each branch of military is so uniquely different. Mm-hmm. It'd be like being at the threshold of being able to decide if you want to go into oil and gas, or high tech, or finance, or manufacturing and retail. I mean, that's a big swing. People think the military are all about the same. Not even close, right? Yeah. Each one has a very intentional and deliberate purpose that's different than the other, to offset each other. So how did you know that were you in high school and you knew? Was it the way to get away from it all, or what was up with that?
Yeah, it's funny because my family jokes a lot when we go on trips, whether they're road trips or, you know, across the pond to, you know, different countries or whatever. We say it's not always about the destination, it's about the journey.
100%.
So for me, my sister was the brain. She was like, you know, daddy's girl. She was older, yeah, 4 years older. She went to DU and got a marketing degree and did what my dad didn't do in his career. My father loved me just the same in certain, you know, different aspects.
Were you the second oldest son?
I was the youngest, just like you.
How many?
3.
Okay.
Right? You were the youngest?
Yeah.
Of 4, though.
Well, yeah, stepbrother. Yeah. But we consider him a whole one.
So I was a smart kid, but I didn't feel the need to apply myself into an expectation like my sister was at, straight A's since, you know, academics started. I wanted to go in the Army when I graduated high school, getting ready to graduate. Yeah. I didn't, no other reason.
What year did you graduate, by the way?
92.
Okay, so I was 1 year behind you.
Yeah.
So, and at that time, the Army was kind of cool. They'd just run through Gulf War, right? They looked like they were
I mean,
tough.
I remember watching the Gulf War on TV in my bed when I wasn't in school, like it was, you know, a show on
Storm.
TV.
Yeah, me too. 92.
I mean, Desert Storm. Yeah, totally. Watching the tanks fast attack across the desert. I mean, it was wicked cool. I was like, that's so cool.
That was Army didn't how it was supposed to work. Like, how do you mean we won the war in like 18 hours?
Yeah,
it's supposed to take some time. People were mad. They're like, wait, I didn't even get to shoot my gun.
Yeah. Well, honestly, I think it's a little literally. We were talking about this earlier, being Memorial Day weekend, and you know, and that concept is that, you know, when you look at military history. The fast attack is really the most productive in a war, because people are trying to plan how long it's going to take. In World War II, after the Treaty of Versailles, you know, Hitler didn't follow it at all. He started building his army up again, and he built it with different technology with only like 30,000 troops. And with what he did by going fast and you know, the
blitzkriegs.
Yeah, the blitzkriegs. They didn't know it was coming. They thought it was going to take 2 weeks to get to France. You know,
they were fueled by one, meth, and
exactly
two, they were fueled by meth. And the second part was there's an adage in that style of combat where you 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 don't want them to be able to respond. You want to force them to react.
Mm.
Because if they're reacting, they're typically in a defensive posture. They don't have a chance to really be strategic. They're just trying to be in a protective. But if they can respond, that means you've allowed them to live and survive and build some confidence that they're going to be able to respond in a way that, look at us.
Yeah.
We got clipped on December 7th, 1941. The bombing of Pearl Harbor was a great example of what happens when you step on us, but you don't put us down.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, we were able to respond. Our reaction was what it was, but when we did respond, I mean, history speaks for itself, right?
Calculated.
Yeah, so it's the same principle
Yeah.
of what you're talking about.
So I enjoyed that. I saw that on the TV. I was like, that's really cool. I'm a person of action. I like to go. I like to, be going.
Yeah.
And the Army didn't want me.
What?
Yeah, they just said, no, we don't need you. We don't
They
want
said
you.
you're not a good enough bullet sponge?
Yeah, I guess.
I don't understand why. Like your ASVAB wasn't high enough?
No, I was above 50. I think I really wasn't applying myself. I'll tell you more about that story when I really get into it.
So listen, so you're in high school though? What are you,
Yeah.
graduated high school?
So I graduated high school, and that was kind of like my plan. Right?
Okay, so you'd graduated. So was your plan when you graduated?
No, it
or-
was before. So senior summer, going into senior year when all the recruiters come. I was a Navy recruiter, by the way, in Florida as well. Yeah. One
Really?
of my last tours of active duty was NRD Miami.
Man, we have a whole bunch. So keep going though. So you were trying to get in the Army. They said, no thanks. We're good. We're sold.
I ended up going to Durango, Fort Lewis College for a year.
Okay.
Actually, like
Ski
3/4 of the year.
purgatory.
Ski, hiked, climbed,
Beautiful out
mountain
there.
bike. Didn't go to college. Best friend committed suicide. Found him. Left school.
That's tough.
I went back to the city. See you in the city. You went to.
I went to
Northern
UNC
Colorado.
in Greeley.
Yeah, you went to UNC in Greeley. I was going to go to that school to be a
Great
teacher,
Great
a history high school teacher. That's what I wanted to do, but I didn't get in there. I got in Durango. Long and short, came back, finished up my second year, met this girl, and she was going into the Navy, and she basically took me down to see a recruiter, and Top Gun, right?
Of course.
F-14s.
So this is because I'm only lagging you by a year. What year did you go in?
I
94?
actually arrived at boot camp on November 14th in 1996.
96. Really?
Yeah.
So I was on the pond before you then.
Okay.
Yep. So you graduated in 92. I graduated in 93, but I went in 95.
Yeah, I took a little bit of so I took the college tour. It didn't really work out for me. Worked,
No, I get it. Look,
yeah.
I was a hot mess. I did what everyone told you you're supposed to do, like go to school and get good grades so you go to good college. And if you go to a good college and you get a good job, and then if you do that, you could be happy.
Yeah.
So I was like, I guess I have to go to this college thing next. This is going to just stamp this. And I hated it. I was miserable. And I was trying to wrestle and be like, if I wrestle there, maybe I won't be so miserable.
Yeah.
But
A piece of what you knew and you enjoyed.
but it still sucked.
Yeah.
It wasn't volatile enough. It wasn't kinetic enough. The static environment of being in that I'd been in that environment for 12 plus years, like all of us have, but I was the kid that was barely making it through school because I couldn't sit still in class. So
Mhm.
the last thing I needed was that. I needed to go do something, So when did the switch flip for you where you're like, I'm going to go join the Navy? And how did you know that you wanted to be an AT?
Yeah, so I wasn't doing anything good with my life. I was managing a Einstein Bagel Brothers. That's when Einstein Bagel came on the scene, and they started taking the market
I
of the
love
bagel.
Einstein bagels.
Yeah. I was literally getting up at like 3, 4 in the morning to make the bagels, like the Dunkin' Donuts commercial,
Love them.
Loved it. But I wasn't
Where were you
doing-
living?
I was in Littleton, Colorado,
Mhm.
downtown Littleton. I was training all the district managers and wasn't getting the love and the promotion to get to be a district manager, and hired this person, and she ended up telling me to come to the recruiting station and check it out. I met my recruiter was an AT1.
Oh,
And,
that explains it.
Yeah. And he's like, hey, you're here. I heard you like, flying, like planes and
planes.
like Top Gun. And why don't you go take the practice test in the back room while we take care of, this person? And I was like, okay, sure, whatever. And honestly, I was, I was high at the time, and I hope that's not, too bad to say.
Who
but-
was it when they were talking to
Yeah.
recruiters? Go ahead.
So I took this test, and he's like, bro, we got to get you down to MEPS. And I'm like, what's MEPS? And so he took me down there like 3-4 days later. And, I was like, hey, I'm just here to see what jobs you can offer, just like every other person said, right?
But you'd already taken the ASVAB?
I took the ASVAB down at MEPS.
Okay,
and
the real ASVAB.
Yeah, the real
Okay.
ASVAB. He got me on the practice test, and I think I was like my first ASVAB. I think my last one I took was like a 56. Right? And I really wasn't, I wasn't like in it to like this is my career,
Sure.
So I passed it, and they made me an E3 because of the college.
You got a school you're going right
Yeah.
into or something.
And that's when I joined.
Great Lakes. You were to go Great Lakes for basic?
Yeah, I went to Great Lakes.
And then you went from there to
Pensacola
for your A school?
A school.
And how long was that school?
Well, I did so they had to catch me up in my math. So I took like a preparatory, like a pre-A school course. It was
That's
like
kinda cool.
6 weeks.
I do think the Navy does a pretty decent job of trying to help you be successful.
Absolutely.
They taught us, I took classes on how to take tests.
Yep.
I was like, what are they really? I mean, you're not cheating, but they're just telling you how to psychologically, there's a strategy to everything.
Like if the answer's really long,
Yeah.
one of the
There's a whole art
options-
to it.
Yeah.
Who would have thunk?
So I took that, got my math up because aviation electronics technician, I mean, it's all math, ohms, amperage, voltage, blah, 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 and
Nursery
series
rhymes.
parallel, all that jazz, right? Then I did the A school, which was, I can't remember exactly how long, it was probably like 2 months. I mean, I was in Pensacola forever. And then,
But like a year of school?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Good.
Yeah, it was great. It was the best time.
But you're spending a year just being, that's a completely different environment to learn in. The classroom training you do in the military, it's not the same homogenous environment from a high school or
Right.
even a college, in my opinion. I think that's the only reason why I was able to thrive. But I did have to stand behind. I was the guy that was always at the back of the class with his uniform relaxed, normally no shirt on because I'd fall asleep. So I had to stand up in the back.
You had to stay not from getting too hot.
I'm
so
the
you
guy
wouldn't
that's
fall
slapping
asleep.
himself in the face. Yeah, I had to really change my lifestyle in school because I didn't realize how to connect what I was doing in the evenings back into what was happening to me in the mornings in the classroom. Like I don't understand, man. I'm having such a good time in the evenings. Why can't it just all turn on for me in the morning?
Yeah.
And I realized I was having too much of a good time.
Yeah, for me it was more like so I've never been a really good test taker. Anxiety, I get like I'd like to consider myself pretty smart. But when it comes down to literally getting on a piece of paper or on a computer or whatever, taking a test, it's just like boom, blocked, like don't know anything.
It's the stress inoculation of the test?
Yeah.
Interesting.
The need to perform, the need to be successful, the need to be
They fix that? They fix that on you?
I think other people help me fix that.
How'd you fix it?
Confidence.
How do you get that though?
Someone who shows you compassion and supports you and cares about you, and someone that I'm not saying there weren't people in my life that weren't like loving and they used the word love and they cared for me and they took care of me, but in the end, when it comes down to it, when you add all those other things into life, like the alcoholism and the disruptive family and all that stuff, it's
Yeah, it's all variable.
yeah, it makes you really kind of a weak person, And honestly, yeah, the military for me was like a challenge. Like I didn't have a problem with athletics. I was a state swimmer. I played football until I didn't make the junior varsity. So I went.
What position did you play?
I was a believe it or not,
Something fast?
I'm a slow runner. So, but I love running. I can't run anymore. But I was the center or on offense, and I played linebacker. But although I love the sport the most, I can't really play it. I could throw a football like John Elway, but I'm not fast. I can't run. I understood the game, the strategies, and everything, but I wasn't fast enough to be in those fast games.
Was that your favorite sport growing up? Football?
It was my favorite sport to watch, play, enjoy. But I swam, played lacrosse.
Tough sport.
Which lacrosse is great because you still got to hit. It was a fast sport.
Tough sport. Yeah, very physical.
Mm-hmm.
Hardcore sport.
Love that. I pretty much play all sports. Actually, what's funniest thing is I didn't win any like academic awards or valedictorian, but I was voted the most athletic person in my senior class. And it wasn't because I was a star quarterback or the pitcher on the baseball team or whatever. It was just because I did every sport and I just loved them. And it was that team, that family, that camaraderie, that esprit de corps
Yeah.
that is what's important to me and
The
family.
brotherhood.
Yeah.
It's like it's a fraternal thing almost. It seems like
Exactly.
every time that you're around a tribe,
Mhm.
we just feel better. It's just part of our primate brains.
Stronger in numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about from the time that you? So it sounds like you hired a new barista or some shit at your restaurant, Einstein, and she was going in and she introduced you to the recruiter.
Mm-hmm.
How fast did it go from the time that you started talking to the recruiter till the time that you were?
Well, I had to wait a couple
Rolling.
months before I could go to boot camp.
Okay.
And although they wanted me to leave like 2 days after, so I went through MEPS, took the test, did medical. Yes means your enlistment stops. No means Navy opportunity.
I thought she was crashed out. I was like, it's that shot we had before we got here.
Definitely.
It put her over the edge. Keep going. It's
Yeah.
like those phrases, damn, they can't hold their booze, I guess. Go ahead, man.
Yeah, so no, totally. So I went through MEPS and, I listened to my recruiter and I didn't know what I was really doing,
Well, when you were in DEP or whatever it is, when you're waiting, what do you do that time? You just training?
No,
trying to get fit?
I was pretty fit. I could do my push-ups and pass the PRT.
But
and
what
all
was
that
the
jazz.
2 months for then?
I just had to get my shit together and get stuff cleaned up.
Gotcha.
I had to make sure that this was going to be my answer. This was going to be my way out. I wanted to make sure that there was nothing that was going to keep me from being able to press forward.
What did you, so a couple months
It was
later?
just 3 months, yeah.
I mean, look, from the time I went into a recruiter's office and the time that I was at basic was 7 days.
Oh.
And it was simultaneously the worst thing and the best thing that happened to me.
Yeah.
Right? I need to have the Band-Aid ripped off fast.
Me too.
Subtlety is not something that really works well with me sometimes. So that quick pivot and hard rotation like that is absolutely something necessary to get me to sit up differently and start paying attention. I remember vividly. Remember when you landed in Great Lakes?
Yep.
You landed in Chicago and you're sitting there, waiting for the van with all these other strangers, and it's like probably 11:30 at night when you landed. Like, what time did you land at the airport? I landed super late.
Yeah, we got there at dark 30.
Yep. Dark 30, and you're standing here going, there's really no going back now. Like,
Yeah.
I'm here.
Yeah.
Like,
well, for me, it was a little different. So I was like, so I was 22. Right? I turned 23.
Oh, wow.
I
So
turned 23 in boot camp.
dude, that's awesome.
No, I turned 22 in boot camp. I'm sorry.
But
I was
still.
21, turned 22 in boot camp. So I was a little more mature than the 17, 18-year-olds that were running around with me.
Which made you popular.
Well, no, actually, it made me an outcast at this time.
At basic or like
At
when you
basic.
graduated?
Just at basic. So I wasn't like RPOC or APOC or whatever they're called. I wasn't a security arms. I was like a division head or whatever, of my little section of the berthing. But other than that, like, I was also had 2 years of college in me. I was kind of a professional in this, in the workforce and whatever. What hit me, like when I first got there and, they're shaving our heads and they're stripping us and they're putting us in, our Smurf outfits. And, what hit me was like the weekend when I didn't like the guy yelling at me for some shit I didn't do, and that was like
Take a number.
taking it back to home, taking it back to childhood.
Oh, yeah.
And
That could
then
trigger you.
I was like watching all these fools like peeing in their beds or, doing stuff to get out, like,
Oh, yeah. I remember all that.
running upstairs with the female division or, and I was like, man, what everybody else is taking all the good stuff. I'm like, what could I do? What can I do to get out of this? And I
Sure.
was like, and I thought one night and I was thinking about it. I was like, why am I thinking that way? Because why would I want to go home
Yeah.
after that? And again, be a bigger disappointment or a letdown or someone that couldn't get their life together. And I said, I'm just going to push through. I actually tried out for the Navy SEALs. And that was when I was like, oh shit, what am I doing? I got to get out of this.
Those guys are pretty real. Did you end up going to Buds or something?
No, just the boot camp
Oh, the
tryout
stuff,
where they,
yeah.
you go and sit in the auditorium. Anybody want to try out for the SEALs? And you're like, yeah, I'll do that. You just wanted to get out of the drills,
Yeah.
and go listen to some cool dudes telling you how you can do this. And I didn't have, honestly, I looked at it and I was like, I was the mold. I was a little skinny rail,
Yeah.
but I didn't have the actual, I didn't believe I had the physical capability to do it.
I think we all thought we could until you actually see what they have to do. And I was like, I can't do that.
Yeah.
Like, I think we all want to be badasses until you have to actually be a badass. And you're like, I'm good. Right.
Yeah.
So I got enough of those people in my orbit now where I know that there's a big difference between them and people like me. I'm like, I'm the guy that's going to kill you to death with my joke, but it's going to be super inappropriate and it will be really poorly timed. right? That's the about extent of badass I could try to get to. Those guys are out there doing those things. There's a reason. We need those people, by
Yeah.
the way.
Yeah.
I'm just not one of them.
I just like supporting them because that was
Yeah.
part of my
They
career
got
in the
funny
Navy.
stories.
Yeah.
They got crazy stories.
Yeah.
So hold on. So you're in school for about a year. When you graduate, what as an AT, did you end up going to like a carrier? Were you on a land-based? I mean, what? How long were you? Because you're in for a lot of time, right?
Well,
so how long were you active? How long were you in active reserve? How long were you in active reserve?
So just like you, when you went off to the different schools,
Yeah, you have some time before you hit the fleet.
Yeah, so we went to A school. I went to C school where I had my NEC for navigation and communications. I went straight. Well, I was a class clown. I was gonna say I was a class leader in A school, so I got second choice of orders.
Yeah,
and
out of how many? Like 30.
There was like 35.
Yeah.
We probably
That's pretty good.
rolled back like 5, and we graduated in like 28, 20, 30.
So what were your options? What were like Pearl Harbor, Norfolk? I mean, like
So I sat down. You got to put your wish list in and all that stuff, dream sheet. And I sat down with the detailer, and he's like, "What do you want to do?" I'm like, "Well, I'm an AT, so I want to work on jets." And he's like, "Well, where do you want to do it at?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't know." He's like, "Well, why don't you go to? Well, how about Norfolk?" And I'm like,
Oof.
I don't like Virginia. No thanks. Like, I didn't join the Navy to stay in the United States, and I'm not knowing any better. I thought I was going to go, somewhere overseas.
Yeah.
And well, we were just on a ship.
Yeah.
He's like, "Okay, cool. You want to go overseas?" He goes, "Well, I got 3 choices for you. How about Japan, Diego Garcia, or Puerto Rico?"
Like Sasebo, where were you going to Japan?
Aircraft carrier.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And that's what I said. I'm like, "Well, Japan. Wow,
That'd be cool.
that'd be cool. Like, tell me more about Japan." And he's like, "Well, you're not really gonna be in Japan very much."
That's where the ship's at.
Yeah. And he's like, "Yeah, that's where the ship's at." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, no ship. Like, what kind of ship?" He's like, "Aircraft carrier." I'm like, "Oh, that's kind of cool." I'm like, "What's this Diego thing?" And he's like, "Well, it's this little island in the middle of the Pacific.
Is that where you went?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. I was like, "Oh, that sounds cool." He's like, "Yeah, it's an Air Force base. There's not much to do there." I'm like, "Oh, that doesn't sound very cool." And I'm like, "What's this Puerto Rico thing?" And he's like, "Well, it's in the Caribbean." I'm like down by Florida? And he's like, "Yeah, Caribbean, Latin culture." I'm like,
Stop. That's how you went to Puerto Rico.
I went to VC8, Fleet Composite Squadron 8. So we were SAR Island, SARDET Island. So we do SAR missions,
Really?
recovering drones, right? That they would tow behind the F4s and, our pilots. So before the air wings would go to overseas on 6 months or whatever, they would go do a Com2X in Puerto Rico. So we had the adversary. Remember in Top Gun what Jester and the Top Gun instructors flew the A4s?
Yeah.
So we were A4H3 squadron. So we were an adversary squadron painted up with
enemies
with Chinese red stars, and we would fight the F-18s and the F-14s before they would go over.
Cool.
Yeah, and then we would recover the drones and do island SAR. So I did that for 3 years, and made E4 out there and met my wife.
Cool.
Yeah, it was wicked cool.
So your missus is from Puerto Rico.
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
and that's where you met her.
Met her. Yeah. Funny story. One of my buddies from Boston was like, "Hey Todd, I need to get a cell phone. I need to get a cell phone. You're the only one that knows how to speak Spanish." And I wasn't fluent. I just knew enough to, where's the bathroom? How do I get a beer? Stuff like that. So we went to the cell phone store. It was close to the base, and we walked in with our UDTs and our boondockers and our white T-shirts and a hat on, and the lady's like, "Rebecca, gringos," and she was the only one happened to be there because it wasn't her store. She was a field rep.
Sure.
And she came out from the back to speak English to these two gringos, and that song,
You're one of them.
Dreamweaver.
Shut up.
She walking out of the back room.
That's too funny. Like a mama over there. She's like, "That's right.
Yeah.
That's how I roll."
So I fell in love like that. And
good for you, man.
Yeah. And so that was the first command. Kind of.
Were you on your first enlistment by that point? I mean,
first enlistment.
How much longer did you have?
That was so I was working on 4 years. So we did 3 years there. I did a year in school, so it was my 4th year. I was like, "Hey, this whole Navy thing, I got to take orders. Can't stay here. We're about ready to have our first kid. Like, where do you want to go?" And she's like, she gave me some options, and we picked San Diego. So we packed up, took off, and landed in San Diego with HC-11. We were Det 15, which is the VIP transport for the 3rd Fleet Admiral on the USS Coronado, which was based in Point Loma at the time. They called it Building 11 because it really never went anywhere. Flat bottom, LH,
gotcha.
amphibious landing
So it
ship.
just got drug
transport.
around or pushed
Yeah.
by tugs and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we went to like Mazatlan and Hawaii and Portland Rose Festival and Victoria and Vancouver and did that whole fun around.
That's what you did in the Navy?
I have 5 years of sea duty, but only 3 months and 11 days out to sea on the books. So we would dead out.
Wow.
We would fly the admiral out to the ship, and when he didn't want to stay, we would just fly back. But when he had to go out, like in RIMPAC 2000, where I made E5 at Hickam Air Force Base, well, that's where we found out the results. We were gone for like 2-3 months, and that was like my biggest cruise. So my actual deployments, my lengthy deployments, had been individual augmentations or future mobilizations through other commands that I was a part of. So I never really was a sailor. I mean, I went across the lines and all that
You
stuff.
get like the prime meridian and the equator, right?
Yeah.
It's like order of the rock and order of the ditch or something like that. Yeah, I forget what they call those. I didn't have those. I think I had I had one of them. Shellback maybe.
Shellback, yeah.
There's another one too. But
Yeah.
all right, so you're in for.
So I re-enlisted in San Diego.
So how many years active did you end up doing total?
I did just about 12 years active duty. My last tour after, so I was in H3s, 46s, 60s, 53s, but mostly H3s.
So people here, I mean, that's the helicopters, right?
Helicopters, yeah. So the Sea King was the H3. The Black Hawk.
Yep, like
that's the Seahawk.
Mm-hmm.
That's the 46. I mean the
MH60 or H60.
60. Yes, I'm sorry, the 60. So we were transitioning. So mind you, the H3 was commissioned in 1960s, like pre-Vietnam.
For real?
Yeah, and they were just mostly SAR and anti-sub.
Okay.
Because they had the big Doppler buoys where they would drop buoys into the water and they would track you guys.
Echo ranging, yeah.
Yeah. So the H3 was aging. The airframe was going to go out, and 60s was everything. But I had a critical NEC, and so I was up for reenlistment. Came off of a deployment.
What were you? E5? E6?
E5 at the time. Just made E5 coming off of RIMPAC. That was like dropped in. Wife, what family was around, came re-enlisted for another 8 years. Got like a $65,000 signing bonus.
For 8? Did they let you do it like somewhere where you get the whole thing tax free or
half up front because we were back on land.
Oh,
I got half and then installments after that.
Sure.
Which was great for us at the time because E3s living in San Diego, we were like on welfare.
Sure.
It wasn't fair. It wasn't enough money to do anything. I had a second car, but it had no floorboard. I mean, it was like $1,000 Volkswagen Jetta, not a Jetta, Volkswagen Golf. Right?
But those are good years, you
Yeah.
know, when you're that age. Like you have to kind of struggle and be uncomfortable, and if not, then what purpose would you have to try to improve yourself?
Gotta earn your wings.
Yeah, it has to suck a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So the whole scenario that you're talking about, I think every one of us that have ever taken the oath one day would be like, I remember, maybe not in the exact context, but vividly enough, they could remember having days that they felt the same way you did.
Yeah, yeah.
So you did 12 active, and then at what point did you like, I'm gonna go some?
Yeah, so the math may not be adding up, but after I left HC11, they wouldn't let me go to the 60 program. So because I had this NEC for H3s, the helicopter I was working on, so I was like, all right, if you don't want to play my game, then I'm not going to play your game. You have to send me to special programs. I'm going to go recruiting duty because that at the time was the big deal where you would advance your career.
If you're a
recruiter, and then you would get choice orders.
Because it's like a thankless job, kind of, right?
Yep. So I asked the wife, hey, let's go do this. She goes, can we get back to my family somewhere close? And that's when we came to Florida.
Okay.
It was a tough job. Like that might as well have been my sea duty. Like I was a windshield warrior, running all over Florida.
Where were you at?
Southwest Florida, Fort Myers, Cape Coral, Naples. This whole
Did you ever keep in touch with all the people that you put in, or any of the people? Like, did you ever serve with any of the people you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, totally. I actually was did that individual. I was on MOB in Iraq, and one of the guys that came to this individual augmentation in Iraq was a kid I put in the Navy.
Oh, cool.
One of the guys had just retired. he came he had to get like 8 different waivers to get in. He had 3 kids at the time, married, had like all these bills,
Yeah.
he had to get waivers on all that stuff to get in. But he's now like a 04 retiring.
Good for him.
He started enlisted, went through that, and
I
became
think
a 04.
there's so many things that Uncle Sam has to offer you if you join the military. It's limitless. It's just what do you want to do?
Yep.
So you were in, you didn't like what they were doing, you became a recruiter, and then is that where you fell in love with talent acquisition?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the genesis behind, because I want to pick up from there and then start because there are people that are going to listen to this podcast, and some, like, the beauty about the podcast is that it could hit the fleet, right?
Mm-hmm.
It could get to the soldiers, sailors, and everything that we're trying to reach. But at the same time, those are the only ones that will identify with you. Now, there will be people in the industry that are also listening, and they're like, well, is this another podcast with just another veteran? The answer is no, right? You are a veteran, but it's talking about how you got into our industry.
Yeah.
And that's the best part of all these stories we try to share, is the human side of them and then the professional side of them, and how that chasm came together.
Yeah.
So as we turn the corner here, for you were in, walk me through between that and then how you like changed around this whole thing where like, this is the part where I'm going to really focus on most. And that's acquisition of talent.
Sure. Loved the recruiting. I just love being out with people. I love engaging people in any way possible.
Interesting.
I like talking to them. I like helping them. I like, taking burdens from them. As I was recruiting, I recruited this kid, and he was 17. I had to go to his house and get dad's, signature. And he was part owner of a talent, of a recruiting firm. And he said, why don't you come, when you get out, come and look me up.
Oh, help you get a job.
Yeah. So it was 2006, 2007. I was at E5 still. We were at the end of our tour, and choice orders, right? So I would talk to the detailer again, and he's like, yeah, you get choice, these 3 choices. It was Key West, H3 Island SAR, same aircraft that I was getting away from.
Sure.
Norfolk,
Okay.
H3, haze gray and underway.
Yep.
Or Mayport, H3's haze gray and underway. And at the time, I was already windshield warrior in it with the windshield warrior with the recruiting, and the wife and I was like, hey, it's not going to be good to go out to sea for 5 years and family, and we had 3 kids at the time. So now we have 3 kids. So I was like, let's just get out. And this is my version. There's a lot of other versions running around, but this is my version. So
it's the only one that matters.
Yeah.
Your reality. I got you.
Yeah, totally. So I said, let's get out. Called that guy up, interviewed. It told me the story about, making ungodly amounts of money, placing, candidates, and, you have everything you need to do it. And so I got out. I made E6 off the last test I took, and the guy was getting me out. He's like, hey, can you hang out for like another 6 months? And I'm like, why? He goes, well, you just made E6. I want you to get paid E6 before you get out. And I'm like, all right, good deal. I could hang out for another 6 months. No big deal. So in that 6 months, I was like, I'm not really done with my service. Like, I have this desire to do something else with my career. And so far, it really hasn't been fulfilled. Like, I remember I wanted to be in the Army. I thought I wanted to be a Navy SEAL. I didn't make it past 5 minutes.
You just want to do something significant.
Yeah. So I called up my buddy who was a recruiter for the reserves. And I said, hey, Charlie, his name was Charlie. I said, hey, what can I do? Can I get in the reserves? So 7 days after I got off active duty, I was sworn into the reserves. And I started
7 days?
7 days later.
But then they made you an active reservist, so you're kind of like, I don't understand that whole model, how they do it. You don't have to explain it on this podcast, but I'm like, it seems like were you right back with the regular dudes?
I was,
are you with a different unit altogether?
That evolved. So started out with Expeditionary Marine Force, like RIVRON, anti-terrorism task force type work. So I wasn't an aviation guy. I was actually working as an MA type expeditionary warfare. So this is post 9/11. This is, SEAL insertion extraction. This is anti-terrorism,
sounds like a pretty
pirating.
cool job for an AT.
Yeah, I was like totally excited about it because I told the recruiter, I was like, hey, I just don't want to be an AT, but I want to do something fun, exciting, like military-ish. So he put me in this thing that evolved into other roles. But so I would mobilize, or I would go on orders, or um, extended annual trainings, additional training periods, where I would go and mobilize up for like 3 months to Norfolk and play Army in the tents, and do whole like scenario drills where they're light probing us and they're attacking us and how we react and reactionary forces and all that stuff, like GI Joe stuff.
Sure.
So we trained on that for a while, mobilized, came back. All this time I'm working as a headhunter. Like, this is pre LinkedIn. Like,
Wow.
this is like still like looking in phone books, like calling, dialing for dollars, always be closing.
Who are you a headhunter for?
So we opened up. So I partnered with a firm called Energy Recruiters, and that's where I started recruiting.
Where were they out of?
In Florida, Bonita Springs, Florida.
And you were on active reserve.
I was a reservist, so yeah. So I would go and I wouldn't just go my 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year. We would do like quarterly mobilizations.
Okay.
So we'd go away, go in the field, go to gun shoots, get qualified for the boats, all that stuff.
Was that kind of cool?
That was great. Loved it.
When you're in reserve duty, does it count like active?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you do.
Yeah, I did a full 23 years, so I get a retirement when I'm 59 and a half.
Okay.
So
because you finish on reserve, you don't get to retire immediately?
Correct. Well, you retire. I have a retiree badge, ID, and all that jazz,
Yeah.
but you just don't get your money until your retired money until you hit that 59 and a half year mark. Now, if you do,
and what do they pay you at? Like the last rate you came out at, like E6 or whatever?
So you get your E7 pay. So I end up retiring as a chief,
Okay.
Y&C. So I changed my rating.
To yeoman.
Yeah, to yeoman.
Yeoman chief. Okay, cool.
Yeah, so I couldn't make chief as an AT because I was never in maintenance control. I never had, any of those qualifications to compete on the eval system. So at one point, a guy that came into our command as an E5 ended up making chief before I, made chief, and he came out of season and he said, "Hey, why don't you cross rate? You do admin already. Your civilian profession is headhunting. You should cross rate to like an NC or an admin function." Literally that annual training period I was on, I did my whole package to convert as YNC. I was converted within a month. A direct conversion, same rank, same pay grade, the whole nine. A month later, I took the chief's test and I made YNC that same month.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
That's a great story.
It was literally legit. Like, career paths are so amazing. Like,
Smart.
you can really control your career path in any respect if you just apply the policies and
I would have never even known that was an option.
Yeah. So
you get paid when you do retire.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
So you were telling me about this company that you went to go work for, and you were already doing headhunting. How did you like that?
I loved it. I didn't know much about it, but I knew how to talk to people and I knew how to get their time and their attention, whether it be a candidate or a client. I just needed to learn the industry. The industry.
What was that industry? Oil and gas? Or
oil
energy?
and gas, energy, in the whole scope of it. But at the time, it was oil and gas because, it's crude oil, Shell, ConocoPhillips, BP, all the major Exxon Mobil, Oxy.
Yeah.
So I didn't know anything about that industry. So I just went on this site called How Stuff Works. I don't even know if it exists anymore. Pre-Ask Jeeves, remember? So I went on How Stuff Works and downloaded and printed out every single thing about oil refineries, midstream, upstream, downstream.
So you were alone and you were teaching yourself about all that?
Yeah, I posted it up all over my cubicle around me. I highlighted all the things that the companies were looking for in a process engineer, mechanical, rotating stationary engineer, whatever. I highlighted those things in this wallpaper of my cubicle. And then when I called candidates, I'd be like, "Hey, you're a process engineer? Tell me about your day-to-day." And then when he or she said something and I highlight over what was being highlighted that the company said, yellow and blue made green made money.
Sure.
So I submitted that candidate to the company and I did okay. I mean, it was hard. It was eat what you kill. So you had a draw plus commission. You got 60%.
A lot of pressure.
Lots of pressure.
You got to perform. You have to bet on yourself.
A lot. And then you're at the mercy of the people who are paying you, in the end, guaranteed periods, all that jazz. Loved it, but it was really hard.
So how long did you do that for? And then you're going to help me dovetail back into how you found your way into the data center industry and how you work for the largest data center provider on earth.
Totally easy. Love it. So I was doing that, learning that role.
For First of all, you still working on that blends? Is that what that is?
Yeah.
Dude, let me know when you're ready to try this Widow Jane.
Yeah, I'll take some.
No, go for it. Keep telling your story.
So the market crashed. Yeah. The
You
oil
don't
and
have-
gas, the market crashed.
What
Price
year
up.
was this?
2007, 8, 9. The housing market.
You want some of this, Mama? I got you.
The housing market crashed. The oil and gas market crashed. The price of oil, shelled. All the companies were like, we're not using agencies anymore.
Oh, okay.
So-
So that was like an affordable luxury that people one
Right.
day just woke up and said, we're not going to pay for that anymore.
Yep.
And that's when, were you still on the reserves then?
Yeah, I was still. So I had my anchor of
So
the
you kind of
reserves.
had something else to fall back on. Is that because you said something earlier, like I ended up going to Iraq or something
Yeah.
like that?
So that's when I went. So I was actually with that command that I was telling you about, where we did like RIV-RON and Expeditionary Warfare and Anti-Terrorism Task Force. We were going to mobilize, and I was actually in Norfolk, but my clearance wasn't. It was in an interim status.
Like
It
an
hadn't-
SSBI or something?
Yeah, and it hadn't been finished yet, and the CO didn't want to take anybody who didn't have a full, complete, clearance. So they sent me home, and then I IA'd with
What's IAID?
individual augmentation.
Pass this back to the doctor over there.
So I
Yeah.
basically volunteered to go to the Middle East. And
Oh, that's his. That's his. My bad.
I
almost
volunteered to
ruined
go
it.
to the Middle East in 2009 through 2010, when I basically lost my job.
That one's. Oh,
Lost my job.
during the headhunting boom that paused.
Yeah. And then I did that.
Did you go over there as a yeoman?
Was a
Yeoman chief?
yeoman. Yep. But I wasn't working in that capacity. We worked for NAV LSG, Navy Logistics Expeditionary Group. So we basically went over to different locations throughout the AOR. Landed in Kuwait Christmas Eve. Was in hang out for a couple days. Then went over to Iraq. Was in Al Assad for about 8 years. 8 months. I'm sorry, 8 years. 8 months.
I know what you meant.
Yeah,
I know
thanks.
what you meant.
Felt like 8 years. Now I know what a turkey feels like, right? When you put that turkey in the oven,
Oh, that's how hot it was.
you felt like you're cooking from the inside out.
I've never felt that.
Yeah.
The hottest I did was we pulled into Road to Spain, and the Marines were sleeping on the. This is the day where I'm like, thank God I scored higher on my test than those guys, right? Because they are sleeping outside on cots under the stars, and it's 2 a.m. It's 112 degrees outside.
Yeah.
I would have not functioned well in that environment. Like, I was complaining because the air conditioning on the submarine moored to the pier was a little too cold. I had to go upstairs topside and I had to get a little bit of, I had to thaw out a little bit.
Yeah.
Right? And these guys are looking at me like, I don't want to hear you bitch about it. Those guys were, it gets hot. And
Yeah.
like, I have guys on my team that have all been to Afghanistan and Iraq, and the stories they have is the extreme heat and the extreme cold over there.
Yeah.
So if you were there for both seasons, I guess it gets pretty nasty. in the
Yeah,
winter.
I was there from like I said, I landed Christmas Eve, and I left home and came back in August, September timeframe.
What well, when all this is unfolding and you're over there for 8 months, you come back and did you go back to
I went back to
headhunting?
So that's when I opened Frey Enterprises Incorporated, my own headhunting firm.
When you did that, did you have like an anchor client, a pocket client that you
No,
knew?
I partnered with another agency again, Executive Leadership Solutions, in the same area. They were actually competitors. They actually worked together at one point in time and split. So I didn't bring their clients, but I brought my knowledge of the energy sector to that firm,
Uh-huh.
and I brought that niche to they didn't have that.
And was that industry back up and running?
It was back up, but it was renewable energies at the time.
Okay.
So just like how we working with our energy solutions, what was going on is all that was getting favored by the government. So is being the solution, solar, wind, geothermal, biofuels, biodiesel, algae, all those different alternatives to energy were my new clients, because that's what was hiring and that's where the money was going. Right.
So how long did Fry's keep running?
So my whole goal, this draws us to Equinix.
Okay.
My whole goal when I came back was I had a driver. I had somebody pushing me to finish my bachelor's degree.
Okay.
I finished my bachelor's degree. We're alumni.
Okay. Same school.
Yep. And then I started applying for jobs, and they were like, "You're not competitive enough." My other the same driver told me, "Get your master's degree." So I got an MBA,
Nice.
and I was like, "Hey, I got an MBA. Can I have that job now?" And they're like, "You should have got a concentration." And I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" So I went and got a master's in project management, master's certification program in project management, and Garner, IT research and advisory company, was my corporate get into the corporate world.
So you went to work for Gartner first?
Went to work for Garner, and I did recruiting for them. Loved it. It was like the Google of our area.
Sure.
You know, we had a gym, we had a cafe. They fed us.
Where were you out of it? Where's this?
Fort Myers,
Okay.
Florida. That was their next headquarters from
I had no idea.
up north down to Fort Myers. And a year and a half later, Equinix called.
They called you. Were you
Yeah.
calling on them to try to pick up as a client, or how'd they find
No, I don't remember exactly how we found each other per se directly, but I remember I had like 10 interviews.
you? No kidding. How long ago was this?
How long ago was this?
How long you been at Equinix, I guess?
8 years.
Okay, so you've been there for quite a bit.
Yeah.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
So what made you go there?
So many great things.
Like, how did you know that this, I mean, it was publicly traded by then, I'm sure, right? So like,
Oh, yeah.
so how did you know about this industry, and how did you know this industry was?
I really didn't know anything. I mean, other than what Garner was teaching me, because I was placing people within the research and development, and the IT research and advisory side, as well as the client executive side. So I was learning what I had learned and knew about the IT industry. I was always a fan of IT. Like, I was in the computer labs in college, teaching kids how to use Windows. I was, taking IBM classes, and
You're a nerd.
yeah, I was.
I get it.
Yeah. So,
Nerd.
yeah, I did like a fiber optic certification class down in San Diego when I was stationed there. Like, I'm a lifetime fiber optic certified person. I did
Nice.
fusion splicing in like 2000.
Just hustling. You were just doing these
Just-
things because you're like, hey, at least I'm going in the right direction.
Trying to get
I
an
don't
A+
Yeah.
certification when that was like the thing to do.
know. Was a lot of this like, what was, because your transition, right, was,
Twice.
yeah, but your transition wasn't like a flip of a switch. It was more like you went from, I'm not trivializing those in the reserves, but you went from full-time rock show to weekend warrior rock show, right?
Mhm.
And that transition kind of keeps a toe in the water, so you never really feel like you're 100% removed, because you know that you could dial
Yeah.
up, like in the example when you went to Iraq.
Yeah.
When was your transition? I know you're saying you have two. Explain those two to me then.
I think the transition off of active duty in the civilian world,
Okay, so that is a real transition.
that was the real transition.
Yeah.
That was the hardest transition,
Okay.
period.
Why,
Because,
why was that one hard?
I mean, you went from, making E5, pretty good BAH independent pay,
sure,
to making like $30,000, $40,000 a year.
that's tough. How did
Yeah.
you know then to get out? If you, why? I think that's the mistake that some people make, is they don't realize, they just think it's better. And
Mhm.
it's not just enlisted. There's a lot of officers that, I mean, they could be a captain in the Army, like in 03, and somehow they believe, when they get out, there's going to be a huge line of people that want them for their leadership at
Yeah.
$200,000 a year base starting. And I'm like,
Unrealistic.
yeah, I don't know where that's coming from.
Yeah.
Right. But I definitely know that when we see, I mean, with what you do, we have a business line that's 100% focused on veteran talent acquisition
Mhm.
and managing the expectations of they're not prima donnas.
Mhm.
Someone just gave them false expectations
Right.
of maybe how
Bad
good it is or
information.
how easy it is.
Right.
And I think that's where they struggle, is they're expecting it to be easy, and then the slight indication, which it won't be, gives them pause. And
Yeah.
then some people are like, they probably should have not tried to get out in the first place.
Yeah, there's a lot of analogies and cliches that you can answer that with, like, nothing worth doing is ever easy.
Sure.
We just saw the thing on the side of the building that says "Do what you love."
Sure.
For me, it was an easy decision to get out because I wasn't loving what I was doing anymore, and what was more important to me was my family than
Sure.
my Navy career.
Sure.
So that's why I got off active duty. I chose my family over myself or
Yeah.
my career in the Navy.
When you have 3 kids, it
Yeah.
sounds like it totally makes sense. And then that second transition, though, how long ago was that?
You mean getting off of active duty? It was
Yeah.
just time, 2019.
Okay, so
Yeah.
right before COVID, or
Yeah, right, totally. So I was senior enlisted leader of Naval Operations Support Command, Tampa. So I was for the reserve side, I was a senior enlisted leader to the reserve tenant commands. So I was actually, at the table hearing about all the missions and the plans and all the
It'd be
things.
kind of
And
cool.
yeah, it was really cool because you got to see a whole different slice of the
Were
pie.
you bald headed then?
Yes.
You'd already gone bald.
Already gone bald.
So that looks pretty bad. That's Butch.
Yeah.
It's like Stone Cold Steve
But
Austin.
I
Mark.
obviously had to shave, so I looked really weird without
true.
facial hair.
I get it.
And then in between drills, I had full blown facial hair, and I would show up, shave the next day. But
yeah,
so
of course.
in 2000, so Equinix called. They said, "Hey, we want you to lead our," because I had this recruiting piece of energy, oil and gas, that technical side, plus Gartner, IT research advisory. They were clients.
Did you know someone at Equinix then?
No, didn't
Okay,
know anybody.
But you were recruited from them.
Yep. And I talked to everybody. They also wanted me to lead their military recruiting program.
Is that what you do now?
That's what I do now. So as I grew through Equinix, it was easy to make a decision to go to Equinix 'cause obviously the pay was like night and day.
Plus, it's I mean,
It's
they're
a huge
monster
company.
shop,
Yeah,
of
monster
course.
shop. After I realized who they were, I was like,
Yeah,
wow, this is a Silicon Valley company. This is an amazing industry. It's growing.
it's the largest data center provider in the world on a market cap, right?
Yeah, I have a picture of when I started working and got my first shares of stock as an employee at Equinix. It was like $344 a share.
Oof.
And now it's like $730. I don't know what it is today, but the last time I looked, it was like $730 or something like that. I was there when it was almost $1,000 a share, like
Sure.
a couple of years ago. Amazing stuff. So it was a no-brainer. It was
It's a great shop.
Yeah. The second transition was very easy because as I was a senior enlisted leader, learning all the things that were going on and being part of all the plannings of this and making sure people were getting ready for deployments, the scene changed because pre-COVID, there was preparations and making sure your reserve force was 100% mobile, capable, ready to mobilize and take the mission, no matter where that mission was at. And that mission wasn't being spoken about being overseas.
Okay.
So there was talks of mass mobilizations within the United States.
Oh, even before COVID.
So I retired in September of 2019. I said, I tried 3 times to get a star to fall on my anchor and it didn't happen.
Okay.
So I was like, third time I'm out. Like, I'm not going to make senior chief. I'm at 23. There's no sense staying any longer. And things were changing in the military.
Sure.
At
Plus,
that time.
things were changing in our industry.
Yeah.
Right. So the industry was really taking off because the adoption of the cloud and.
Yeah.
So I mean, you.
Well, my
guys-
career in Equinix was taking off.
Sure.
And it was, okay, so I was mobilizing. So at that time, I was working, before I was a cell for the reserve side of the NOSC, I was with Special Operations Command Korea. So I was going to Korea twice a year.
Was that cool?
It was awesome.
Oof,
It was
dude.
great. Food, talking about being a foodie.
Right.
But the bad thing was you were sleeping in tents when you were in the field. Otherwise, you're in the Hilton. It's Seoul Towers.
Okay.
Uh,
But I mean, like, why would a Navy yeoman be sleeping in a tent in South Korea? Oh,
well,
because you were working
we were supporting Special Operations Command joint ventures with
Got it. That makes a lot more
Korean
sense.
Special
I'm like, I
Forces.
thought the yeoman chiefs always had the greatest setup on earth. That's why they became yeoman chiefs.
Well, remember, where the 2 missions they do every year in Korea are simulating the war,
oh,
and they practice that.
to be
So,
proficient. And
Yeah,
ready.
you got to be out in the field because you're not always going to be hanging out in the
Sure.
hotel, or your home.
So
especially.
when you got to Equinix, did they initially ask you to start the veteran recruiting initiative? And what is that? Like, what does it look like?
Well, then it was just transitioning service members. It was you coming out of the military, a Navy nuke or
Were
whatever.
you going to the bases?
Nope. It was it was dialing for dollars, finding Indeed, LinkedIn.
Really?
Mhm.
Okay. Interesting. And you weren't, were there any conferences that you could attend that would have helped you or?
The Orions and the
Oh,
Bradley
sure.
Morrises of the
They
of the
stopped
world.
doing those things a while
Yeah.
back.
hmm They're
mean,
starting again though. I'm
starting
getting
to do
emails
conferences
all
again?
the time. They're like, yeah, virtual or on-site conferences. They're
Are they
bringing them
doing
back.
on sites?
The last couple emails, I believe I saw them being on sites as well.
Well, that's where it's at.
Yeah. I mean, we used to send our data center managers to, New York, New Jersey were great beds for Orions and the Bradley
Sure.
Morris's and
I've been using those shops since I've been in the industry.
so they
I've,
get the hotels and they would get rooms and they
yeah,
would do their
it's a
interviews. Other
beautiful
rooms.
model.
Yeah, we hired but it wasn't about using agencies. So it's never, when you could build it yourself, you don't need to use an agency. So our goal, so at the time, it was easy because when I was recruiting for the Navy, I knew all the ratings. I think the best military recruiters are military people,
Sure.
right? Like,
Same
'cause
for me.
you get it.
We have a guy named Gonzo that was an Army guy, served with Anthony on my team, then was a recruiter, and then went to go work for a recruiting company that was really focused on the contracting side of the world. So when we met him, he was the perfect fit for us. But one of the things that really helped us was his experience, because the military does train us pretty well on advanced machines and weapons and tech, and he learned how to be a recruiter the right way, and it's paying dividends for our business now. I mean, we're pounding our talent acquisition team for amazing talent, and they're able to produce for us. I mean, we'll have a request from somebody. You're driving with me here in the phone calls. Within a day or two, we're putting around the right talent and these guys that can recruit, because there's a lot of, it's like practicing medicine, like we were talking about earlier, right?
Yep.
Some practice better than others. Same with law, but being a recruiter is a talent and that is a skill. And it takes a lot of, you have to have a lot of empathy and you have to understand the social dynamics. And when you're engaging, sounds like that's one of your strengths, I guess. But it's hard to be a good recruiter. I'm lucky to I have some on my team, but I have one that I think that he would even tell you the Army's would help make him a great recruiter.
Discipline, drive, determination.
Yeah, I mean, they have done it so much that they've kind of figured out how to do it right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how many people are training recruiters a year outside the Army? I mean, nonstop. That's a dedicated program, right?
Yep.
That's not arbitrary. That's scalable. It's repeatable.
And it evolves though too. So the military recruiting teams, they have e-teams now. Like they have social media teams.
Yeah.
So they're not just going to high schools or they're not having little fairs, in the cafeterias during lunchtime. They're finding these kids on Reddit, on different.
I wonder if that's a rate in the Navy. Your job is to be a social media recruiter.
They actually, I don't think it's a rate, but
it's a collateral duty.
Yeah, functionally a collateral duty. Sometimes it's even though you're a recruiter or you're an NC, Navy Career Counselor, your function or your mission is. I actually have a gentleman on my team that I serve with in the reserves.
Really?
That is our main talent sourcer. Like this guy knows everything, and he actually pretty much. I don't want to give him too much credit and take credit from anywhere where it's not due, but he pretty much stood up e-talent on the Navy side, and he just the way he sources and the things he does is just so amazing. But I digress. When I started working at Equinix, we were doing like 30% of data center operations hires in North America were Navy nukes.
Oof.
30% of the hires. So we're talking like 100 people a year were going into the data center operations
just for you,
just for us.
Yeah,
and that was pretty cool. But now there's multiple programs, there's multiple things, places to find them. We've evolved. I think everybody has to evolve in their careers. From
every
E3.
branch has someone that would be a great fit.
Yeah,
Air Force has power pros, right? I honestly think that a lot of the infantry folks that I run across that are non-technical tend to have the boat. I think what the military taught us is how to learn, right? It doesn't teach you everything; it just teaches you how to learn.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Yeah.
So now that you take these people with a high aptitude, that they've been pressure tested, right? Like on the construction sites, the infantry guys are the best, and I'll tell you why. I remember when I was at an operator, I used to work for a couple of different operators, and when I was at one, the CEO was mad at one of my guys for not being more emotionally. You couldn't see how much stress he was under physically, from an emotional basis, because the magnitude of the program that we were on and the critical nature behind it, and that lack of panic almost made others panic because like he's not taking it serious enough. And I was like, all right, well, so I'm like, Jesse, you good? And he goes, no one's shooting at me today.
Yeah.
We're all going to go home tonight. No one's going to die. I'm good. We'll figure this out. Right. And that's how easy it is to use your emotion to offset intelligence. Not that he's not a super smart person, But he knew at that part, the emotional range, the ability to deal with that was more important than being super smart and, remembering Ohm's law and like, you don't need to remember some of that shit to do some of the things that we're doing on a technical basis. You just have to be upstairs ready to power through anything.
Yep.
And you have to have the ability to learn, right? So that's why I'm like, I used to think it mattered. Like, and I go to conferences when Naval Station San Diego, we did Operation Hit. You were there. And people were asking me like, hey, what branch of service are you looking for? And then what rate and what rank? And I'm like, it doesn't matter. People are going to hire for character, and then they're going to train the talent that they need in you to go perform your job as a subject matter expert. But they can't teach you how to not be an asshole. They can't teach you how to be selfless. That's something that you already have to have. So if they could find that, then they're starting with some really good things. But if they don't, and they have talent, but they have the lack of character, then what you have is a lot of baggage or bad habits that may not pencil out well when you're trying to fix those things. And it doesn't really bring any benefit to your relationships with your clients when you put people out there that are trying to reinvent themselves and you're hoping that they can, right? They have to have it. They have to have that character. And then that's why I'm like, we shouldn't be focused only on Navy nukes.
Right.
Yes, they're smart.
Right.
But there's a lot of people that are smart too. And there's a lot of Navy nukes I met that under the wrong circumstances don't have the emotional capacity to deal with things that are under high stress situations because they don't know how to manage it. And that's like that in any rank, any rate, in every branch of service. That's why I'm like, it doesn't really matter. It just matters what you got upstairs.
Yeah, I think that's on point. It hits the nail on the head. We like to call it aptitude, attitude, and potential.
Aptitude, attitude, and potential. I like that.
Yeah. So let's be realistic. Like, Navy nukes are great people to go into facility engineering roles that are working on, generators and, HVAC systems.
Very linear in thinking.
Yeah.
SOPs, MOPs.
Our InfoSec or our intelligence specialists are great to go into cybersecurity. I mean, they're trained. They know it. That's where GPS, the internet, all these things came from the military, right? Whatever, right? Maybe not the internet, but you know what I'm saying, what I'm getting at. Like, those ratings are specific, and yes, they do serve a purpose. If you're looking for adjacent industry experience where you could plug somebody in right away, that's perfect. You take your Navy nuke, you take your Army Corps engineers, you take your non-conventional, conventional people, whatever the rating is that supports that specific qualification. But the rest of us, right? There's a purpose for everybody, right? And that's where we take other programs where we could use a workforce development program, right? So Equinix has a workforce development program for the data center space where we could take aptitude, attitude, and potential, put them in a 12-week program, tie them to a vocational technical school, and a 2-year program.
You guys are doing that now?
Yeah, well, it's part of the Nova with, TJ and all those guys up in Loudoun County.
So can we talk about it a little bit? So,
Sure.
I mean, TJ's obviously super stud, stack, Navy nuke.
Yeah.
And he's so passionate and committed to this. He's like a professor at some
junk professor. Yeah, a couple of them are from that whole data center world up there.
Yeah,
in different companies.
This is their purpose. They don't do that. This is what they do on the side of their day job, right? So there's no greater love, right?
Yeah.
So walk me through some of that stuff if you can, or let the people that are listening understand. So maybe there's someone that wants to help or contribute, or they know someone that could benefit from this.
I think you said it in a couple of podcasts, maybe the last one you did or the one before, but this industry is growing so fast that the rest of the world's not keeping up with it.
That's
so
true.
Our academics aren't training. So you can train somebody to be a lawyer, a doctor, or whatever, right? You can send them through school. They go through those rigmaroles and they become that, just like we did 3A schools and technical
Those things
schools.
are very static. You
Yeah.
know, those laws don't change as dynamically as the volatility of our industry that's driven based on us, the consumer, and the adoption rate that we have in technology. There's no crystal ball, right? Everything, all you know is that what we're doing today is massively different than what we were doing a year ago, and it's going to be that much different a year from now.
Right.
So what's the point in going to school and studying something in data centers, knowing that whatever, especially in a 4-year program, think about the way that we use technology. Think about the cell phone you had 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And then that means that like whatever you're learning in college or freshman year will probably be obsolete by the time you graduate as a senior in technology.
Totally. Well, I don't think
And your kids and my kids are going to right now, even our 15-year-olds, there's jobs that don't even exist yet that they're going to have one day, just as a byproduct of the emerging technology and the adoption rate that we'll have. You know?
100%. I think so. You have at colleges and universities, they serve a purpose. You have vocational schools, they serve a purpose. You have technical schools, whatever, they serve purposes. The military serves the purpose. Like you talked about baby boomers in the beginning of the conversation. We look at the way our nation has been grown and shaped. We've review anybody go on here and listen to all your podcasts. You'll see how this industry has been shaped by just the people you have on your podcast, and the majority of them are veterans. Right?
Yeah, I mean,
the connections, the
Yeah.
interlacing connections.
there's a lot of veterans on this podcast that are
Right.
industry. They move the needle in the industry, but they're still military veterans. Like a lot of these people, they got to where they're at based on a foundation that was provided to them through their time in the military.
So for our industry, that's what we need.
Yeah.
And that's what a workforce development program could do. Because why do we send somebody to school for 4 years? They get out of school, they have no experience,
Yeah.
right? And that's where they create programs called,
And they may never struggled through those 4 years. Mom and dad could have paid for everything.
or maybe they don't. Maybe they just work really hard, but still in the same time, they don't have any experience. So they have programs for new to careers. They lower the standard, they let them come in, they get trained up, right? And that's great. That works. But when it comes down to what we do in our data centers and how that industry is building, there's really no industry other than adjacent industries like HVAC schools or apprenticeships or journeyman certifications that
Yeah, the
teach
trades,
you
yeah.
the trades, right? So what happens is like Nova created this data center infrastructure program. I'm butchering the title of it.
And
but
who's Nova?
Nova is a college in Nova is a university,
Virginia.
Northern Virginia. There's a bunch of Novas all over the nation, but this particular one's in Loudoun County, Virginia.
And it created curriculum that
Created curriculum that supported data center training, so they would have some knowledge, some academic book stuff. And then what we did, and a couple other other companies like Equinix did up there in the data center space, is they partnered up and created scholarships. We started with 5 scholarships.
Interesting.
A 2-year program. This has evolved since, but 5 people scholarships, 2-year program. After your first year, you intern during the summer at Equinix Data Center. You have to hit certain stages within your academic course to get to that point. Then you go back and you finish your second year, and then you have an opportunity to come and get a full-time position at Equinix following the completion of that course. That's an abbreviated version of it, okay? So we have that program. We partner with Nova. We create this. We actually, I believe we're doing, the last count I heard was we have 12 interns this year, 12 people in that program this year. So that's one avenue to bring people in.
Now, is
Right.
that paid? Like,
It's paid internship, yes.
that's great.
Yeah, for that 2-month internship program.
That's great, though.
Yeah, it's wonderful. So it's part of your university relations program.
Do they get credits for that?
They get they're getting
Like
a
1 credit, 3?
certifications.
Oh, certifications would they get?
From the school itself, they're getting their certifications or their academic program as well,
Okay.
other than just working at Equinix. So that's a workforce development program. So you're basically,
Mm.
we use a lot of different sources, and it's not just for military. So we've used SkillBridge to accompany that. To
Did you
support
guys
that.
create an element of your own curriculum that you submitted? That are you guys an approved incubator for SkillBridge? Or do you have to partner with someone to get SkillBridge?
No,
candidates?
we're actually have an MOU with SkillBridge.
You do.
Yes, for
That's
the last 3 years.
How hard was that to get? That's a big deal. By the
Yeah,
way.
we did it. So I did it in 2020, right in the middle of COVID. So Equinix found amazing opportunities in our talent acquisition team. We really looked at how we were going to answer the growth, right? Since we opened the doors, we've been growing.
How many employees are like for
Over
people that have
15,000 globally.
15,000 employees?
Yeah.
People don't realize how
huge.
massive Equinix is.
240 plus data centers around the world.
15,000 employees. There's a lot of need for talent too, right?
Yeah, tons. Well, we've been growing we now say over 20 years of consecutive growth. We were at 77 consecutive quarters of top line revenue growth.
That's fantastic.
So
That's
basically, since 1999,
did you guys have a pause somewhere, or is it still going?
it
That
basically,
record's still alive.
yeah, still going.
Okay.
Last quarter, top
It's
line
another
revenue
record.
growth. Yep,
That's
another
crazy.
record.
How many quarters? 70.
Well,
Long time.
yeah, it's like 20. So we're celebrating a 23-year anniversary this month.
23.
This
so that's
next week.
80, 90. Okay, got you.
A lot of
She went to public
consecutive
school in a
quarters
better
of growth.
place than us. She didn't have to use her fingers. Did you see that?
So it was amazing, right? So
That's what it
she
is.
breaks it down by quarters.
Um, it used to be able to be like, I think my wife used to say that she could have already smothered me in my sleep and been out of prison by now. You know,
Yeah, that could be
good behavior probably. But.
Yeah, probably.
So keep going though, because the deal is that's a big program.
Yeah.
And that's a big deal that you guys have the ability to do that.
So we did a lot of things during COVID, right? We recognized that there's a lot of talent sitting on the shelf, right?
Interesting.
People got furloughed. I mean, the world didn't know what they were going to do the next day. So
explain to people what the DoD Skill Bridge program is, though, because
yeah,
a lot of people don't even understand it exists. You guys were at least smart enough to take advantage of it. I don't think a lot of operators have.
Yeah, the Department of Defense and the Department of Labor and got together and they said, well, there's some 200,000 people getting out of the military every year, right? Majority of all of them don't stay within their job that they get out of within, for more than 2 years. A lot of suicides, a lot of homelessness, a lot of.
And the genesis of this was like in the tail end of the collapse of the secondary lending market, like 2008, 2009. So it's not like this thing's been around for like the VA home loan. I mean, this is fairly
new,
right?
Yeah.
And I think the government said, "Hey, look, if you've been institutionalized here, it could be really, really hard to feel comfortable transitioning into the civilian fleet." So we've created this incubator program.
Yep.
And that's the DoD Skill Bridge program, and you guys have used it. So explain it from your context.
So you get every transitioning service member leaves within within the next year or two, what you're going to do. You're either going to take new orders or you're going to get out.
Right.
So the Skill Bridge allows somebody to go on temporary assigned duty or TDY orders to an approved vendor with a memorandum of understanding, where you qualify as a company based on a really long. Like it's longer than buying a house paperwork, right? And you get qualified and you sign a letter of understanding. And usually, during COVID, it was really hard because they weren't accepting a lot of people because there wasn't a lot of ability to process because nobody was really working.
Right.
So I don't know how, but we got through in like 3 months.
Oof.
So we got our program. The first year, actually, that was 2020. We had 9 skill bridgers. We converted 6 of them. The only reason why we didn't convert the other 3 was because 2 of them wanted to finish their education and go to college. And then the other one actually moved to Virginia from LA and got another job. We got him another job.
It's actually not designed for you to hire them all. It's designed for you to give them experience.
Yes.
So it's not like, look, 6 out of 9 still, that's 2 out of 3, you're crushing it. And that means naturally there's going to be some that are they're going to want to go somewhere else as long as you help them.
Yep.
They're actually sometimes going to maybe even do better because now they could go to a place and be like, look, I have experience from Equinix.
Yep.
And that's a lot of credibility because that's a premium brand, right?
Yep.
So like the goal is just to give them experience.
Yep.
So that way they could have a fighting chance,
Yep.
right? Because experience is the one thing that, like we were talking about how, oh yeah, Navy nukes do great. There's a lot of people who do great. They don't have to be Navy. They could be, I mean, the 11 Alphas, 11
25
Bravos,
networks.
Like I'm telling you,
The
like,
ATs.
we were hiring. One of the best hires we ever made was a Coastie. She was a damage controlman. She's advantaged now, but she was on a program with us. She was one of our we have an OVITA is the Overwatch Veteran and Transition Apprenticeship. We're basically starting our own skill bridge program, but we're absorbing the cost of it. So I'm like, look, I'll eat the cost for 6 months for this person to have some experience because then when I do put them on a program, I can justify charging X for them because they do have something legitimate. Typically, we make them get like a CDCP or some alphabet soup behind their name.
Give them a certification with it.
For sure. But that is very deliberate and intentional. And that by the time they're done, they know, they sprech in the language well enough. They know the ecosystem well enough. They understand what their role and responsibility is.
They got keyboard time.
Yeah, and they understand the language, right?
Yeah.
They understand the lexicon that we need to use in this space because we talk in shorthand, right? But it doesn't matter, is what I'm saying. We've hired MPs from all branches. Like, it does not matter what you did.
Yeah.
What matters is what you're capable of doing.
Yep, aptitude, attitude, and potential.
That's it. I've never heard it broken down or codified like that, but I like it, right? So keep going.
Yeah, so the program was great. It was hard to implement on our side because there's no learning manual. There's no NATOPS. There's no
Well, you're the
You
first
know,
one through the wall for that, so it's bloody,
for
right?
us, yeah, but I mean, many companies, it's benchmarking. It's what's Oracle doing with their program? What's Chris doing?
Interesting.
What is what is what are these different leaders in the industries doing with their programs, and how can we use those things to incorporate our program into it? The companies don't really hire people and not pay them. It's kind of against the law, right? Well, we're not paying them, but the
Uncle
government's
Sam
paying them.
is. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's the thing that people
right.
understand. They're still on payroll
Yes, care and feeding still coming from their branch of
and
service.
in benefits,
Yeah,
right? So you're literally the only thing you're laying out to start a DoD program is the cost for the training supplies and materials and support.
and it's a taxpayer break too. I mean, think about it. You're not as a taxpayer, you're not paying that unemployment, or you're not supporting that person on some kind of welfare or something like that as they fail in their process because they weren't properly transitioned.
Well, so let's talk about that a little bit better from a broader aspect, right? Because ESG is a factor now,
Uh-huh.
right? And one of the things that I see is veterans being used for the benefit of saying, hey, we are helping the set asides, right? Like if you're not 8A or female owned or minority owned, then the only other protected class is typically an SDVOB or SDVOSB. So when you think about these veterans, it's not a function of like, as you're talking, like, hey, it pencils better, it's more economically efficient. Like when you start at the beginning of the intent, and we're all governed by our intent, like why are we doing this? You take it all the way down to where it matters most. At the end of the day, if we lost 5 to 6,000 soldiers, sailors, and airmen since September 11th, that's tragic. We've lost, hundreds of thousands of soldiers, sailors, and airmen since they've been home at their own hands, right? And I'm not doing this I think ESG is a factor, so I think it has to pencil out more efficiently. It's more financially accretive. And we have to give them something to say that they're doing something to help a protected class. But at the end of the day, it comes down to, are we helping solve a problem with suicide? Suicide's a factor. Who hasn't been, I don't know anybody that hasn't had that involved in their life at some capacity.
Yeah.
Right. And it's a tragic thing to happen, but it's really, really highly likely to happen amongst the infantry of the Army and the Navy, all the branches that have an infantry unit, like an SF community, a soft community. Those are the people that are more likely to harm themselves.
Yeah.
So when I look at this about, ESG is a factor. So if you want to make it say that you're doing something that's good and me too, and all those things, you did that. You check that box. Diversity and inclusion, check that box. Does it pencil out? Checks that box. But let's not forget while we're here.
Yeah.
We're here to help each other.
Yep.
As you open up, you're like, hey, this is what I am. And
Yeah.
I'm a father. And you went through and you're like, my passion and my purpose is to go help as many people as I can.
Yep.
At the end of the day, we do this so that we could give them an opportunity to have a program that the government created that allows them to transition in a way that makes it less likely for them to hurt themselves, because they will get a skill set through an apprenticeship that allows them to go be significant, and they are able to reinvent themselves. And if they are happy and fulfilled and safe in what they're doing, they're more likely to not hurt themselves, right?
Yep.
So all those things that we're talking about, like the efficiencies of it, let's not forget why we do it, right? The DoD skill bridge is to make it to where we have less. They're getting these people the opportunity to learn and be exposed and have experience, quote unquote. And I always thought that as a joke, right? Because this is the mission critical vertical, and we measure that based on downtime. But those of us in the military that were in a uniform one day, our mission critical wasn't really measured in downtime. It was measured in mortality. So I'm like, if you're saying that this person doesn't have experience, they put their life on the line for others that they worked with. How much more experience do they need?
Right.
So how much character are we looking at? I mean, I'm sure this person who's operated some of the most advanced stuff on whatever can learn this. Not to trivialize what we do, but it's not as hard as primary and secondary nuclear propulsion or some of the advanced weapons that we have to use, right? So if they can figure that out, they have enough experience in stress inoculation that they can figure out how to learn quickly in this industry. Do you agree?
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with that 100%. We have the ability to pass down. We're tried and true, right? So we have this. You said it on one. You said it on one of your podcasts, or somebody said it. How crazy is it that we put a nuclear reactor in a cylinder and intentionally sink it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's not a small reactor.
Right. And who like what what ignorance is a horrible word, right? And that's the problem we have with people they don't look at the whole picture. They don't take the time to understand what value others can bring, right? From where they've come. We're not you and I are tied by our military,
It's a
commitment.
brotherhood.
Yeah. But that's not exactly who we are. That's just a portion of us.
It's an identifier.
Yes. So what's really good about that is we have these skills, like Liam Nilsson or whatever his name is.
I have these unique
Yeah,
skills.
yeah. Like no one else, only a
Taken.
certain amount of people have these skills. Like 3% of our nation
No,
serves.
less than 1/2 of the U.S. population is
Okay,
ever put on the
perfect.
uniform. Less than 1/2. We always say the 1%ers, but it's less than 1%.
So wouldn't you think that would be a skill set, like of that
That's an
experience?
advantage.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Why aren't we
I'm
looking
putting
at that?
people on
Yeah.
programs that there's no volatility
Yeah.
because everyone's going home and no one's being shot at and no one's going to die today. So we're going to work through the problems. I promise you, we're going to find a solution, right?
And if our whole job in what companies want to do is create high-powered organizations, right, through diversity and whatever you define that as, like that's something that's a piece of the pie that I want on my team.
Who doesn't?
Yeah, I mean, there are people that can't conceptualize that.
You want people that have been pressure tested, and like, and that's why they scratch the paint with you when they're testing, like when they're interviewing. They're like, let's figure out. Everybody knows how good you are when things are great. How are you going to be when shit hits
Yeah.
the fan? And that's what we try to figure out during these interviews. And I'm
Mhm.
like, I promise you, especially you could tell by looking at their military background, some of the things they did, and you're like even that Diego Garcia thing. I'm like, I have to. There's no doubt that was a stressful job at early phases of that program because you're training the best of the best
Mhm.
for combat, and they can't go and deploy into combat unless they've made it through that test, probably, right?
Yeah.
So it's a battle. It's like
Yeah.
it's a real thing, right?
Yeah.
So how do you apply that to the civilian community? Like, we get it. We understand urgency. We understand mission critical, right?
Yeah.
It's just it's a collective. That's why I was talking about that cooperative of influence that we all have to contribute to figure out how to change the optics and how we view things. Because the aperture right now is so narrow.
Mhm.
And we're like, no, open that bad boy up. Because, I mean, I'm living proof. I was an E-nothing, right? And I got Army, Navy, and Marine Corps officers that are on my team, and we don't even think twice about rank or branch. We just care about capabilities. And at the end of the day, they lead me just as much as I lead them. They're just teaching me something that I don't know. I'm just teaching them something that they don't know, right? But it's a leader environment.
Yeah.
Officers enlisted. When we leave that stuff doesn't matter. What matters is what you're capable of doing. Do you agree?
Yeah, totally. And it's the proof is in the pudding. And if you say that, use that analogy, like the first year was only 9 people, but the second year was 83 people.
You did 83 in a skill bridge program? Damn.
And we converted 63% of them, and
That's fantastic.
22 of them are still in a skill bridge from that year waiting to finish their skill bridge.
No kidding. And what do you do with the ones that you guys don't convert? Why don't you send them our way?
Totally. I mean,
For
we
real,
do.
like, we have to help them.
I actually sent one of the first ones that I told you that we didn't convert of the 9. He trained in L.A., wanted to move to Ashburn, Virginia, didn't get picked up in Ashburn. I got him a job. I talked to TJ and got him connected with one of the other players up there in the market. And he still works there now.
He's so involved. He's a great. It's humbling, because he's so passionate about this stuff, right? And wherever I'm at doing this stuff, I always bump into him, and he's 3 steps ahead of me.
When's the last time you talked to him?
I didn't see him I saw him at a.
He didn't come to San Diego. He said he was.
Yeah,
But he
I
didn't.
didn't see him there. I saw him in Houston about 3 months ago at a Navy SEAL Foundation
Okay.
dinner that Enchanted Rock sponsored a table and then invited me as a guest.
Nice.
So Anthony and I went, and he was there, and there was a bunch of different operators that were there, like 3 or 4
Yeah.
different operators. So he was one of them, and I get to see him. I mean, look, I've spoken on panels and stuff like that with him. He's a very smart, very well-spoken, very articulate person. But he also, he does it. He doesn't talk about it. He's doing it, right?
Yeah.
So thank God there's people like him that are
Yeah.
out there that are actually plowing through and carrying the torch.
Yeah, there's a lot of those out there, and I think we're part of that group. What do we do with ones that we can't convert? So we're realistic. We have onboarding checkpoints, mentors. They're part of our mentoring program with our ERG called Vet Connect. We call it a Equinix Employee Connect Network. Um, we're realistic about when they're getting ready to convert. Every position is available for a skill bridge at Equinix.
Really?
Right? So if you apply to a financial analyst,
So they could be HR. They don't have to be construction management or operations. They could do finance, HR.
any
business.
position is eligible for any of our skill bridge candidates to apply to.
Interesting.
So what we'll try and do is match them up. Like if they're, if the G&A team wants an accountant, we obviously are not going to throw an MP at them,
Sure.
right? We're going to try and. So I had a Naval Academy grad. He got like a finance accounting degree or something like this. I was like, what? But he did all that stuff in his command as a department head, did all the budgeting, the money, the ordering, supply. So he had all that background and knowledge and experience. So he was an easy fit in there. But if there's not a role that we can identify exactly with somebody, we'll still bring him in within that group, right? And what we're looking at is you use SkillBridge in kind of 3 different ways. You use it for an actual hire, earmark that position for them to complete the program successfully and convert them. You use it as attrition strategy. So you don't have a head count right now, but based on trends
You
and
always
analytics,
have a holding pattern. People on the bench
the
are
pipeline.
proficient.
Yeah.
I love it.
Bring the lefty out, whatever.
I like it.
Or you have projects. You're very fond of projects yourself. You have a great career in that. We have different projects that we do out throughout the year with different pieces of the business. So we know that we're going to get budget in the future for that. Why not bring that person? We're opening to.
Everybody benefits. They
Yeah.
benefit because you're giving the opportunity to get experience. So they
Mhm.
could be worth something later on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not commoditized down to how much experience they have, but they could check a box. That's all it is. We're just helping them check a box because some people are just old school. Like, we get resumes. We get requests from people that are like, they need 5 years experience and a master's and whatnot. I'm like, do they really need that? Or do they just need to be really good at these things? Like there's requirements that I've gotten where I don't think anybody on my team would have qualified for some of these requirements that we have. But I'm like, listen, what do you really need? Like, let's start with what you need, except something that's canned off the shelf that has all these things that have been proven to not really matter.
Typically, there's like 3 or 4 things a hiring manager wants. They want it now. Like cheap, yeah, right.
Fast, cheap.
So you can't have 4. You can only have 3. Which are the 3 most important to you?
Yeah.
And then I'll go find those 3 things.
Sure.
And then the rest we'll figure out as we go.
No, I'm learning how humbling it is to get into that side of the business, on the talent acquisition side, because it's not enough to have a good opportunity and a good purpose. Like, you need to have a good process on how you're going to onboard these people, because it's their career, right? It's their own professional IP that they're entrusting with you to help them develop and code. And if it's an investment of time and it doesn't yield them anything, they're going to be really skeptical, right? And we've learned that. Like, we want that. We want people that are armed to the teeth, that are coming in and they're advocates for themselves. And you're like, good. That's something that I think we learned in the military, is to go fight for ourselves a little bit. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely, 100%.